Welcome back, troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Happy Fender Friday, everybody! We are going to discuss a new series from Fender today. They're calling it Vintera. Gotta tell you, doing research for this, I kept typing in Vintera, Ventura, Ace Ventura, no. So my first question is, what is a Vintera? So, natural instinct, go to the dictionary. No results. My next thoughts were, well, maybe it's car related, because those references always go over my head. But the only thing Google would pull up besides this new Fender series is a Vintera TV. So then looking at the word, it's, well, does it mean like vintage in the new era? And after cheating a little bit and looking at Anderton's video, yes, that is confirmed where it comes from.
And this is a kind of a mashup word of vintage era.
So the new Vintera series is 20 new instruments, which is basically replacing the Made in Mexico classic lineup. They're tributing all their bass models from the 50s through the 70s and kind of giving them some cool finishes. I mean, these are kind of interesting guitars. And I had someone on Instagram asking me about these, so I figured we'd go ahead and cover all of these today. Starting with the Vintera 50 Stratocaster. First off, spec-wise, it looks like we get an alder or an ash body. That's kind of nice, you get a choice with a soft V-neck profile, 50 Strat style pickups, a period accurate fretboard with a 7¼ inch radius and 21 style vintage frets, with the old style tremolo unit and vintage style tuning machines. And they've got some pretty cool colors here, a seafoam green, a sonic blue, and white blonde. That's kind of interesting here. Even though I kind of like these surf colors, I think my favorite one has to be this one since you can see through it. The only thing I'm kind of confused is it really an option between the body wood, or is it just the see-through finish that they decided to do ash since it has better wood grain? Only maple fretboards are available on these. Next is the same thing, but it says it's modified. And it's looking like modded means you've got the modern neck profile and fingerboard radius with hotter pickups and updated electronics. And by updated electronics, I was wondering, does that mean the old ones have three-way switches on them? No, it just looks like they have the S1 switch, which will add the neck pickup sound in positions 1 and 2. So it looks like only alder body options on these, the hotter pickups, soft V versus modern C, a 9½ inch radius fretboard on this one versus 7¼ and larger fret wire on 21 frets. But the more modern one is $100 more expensive at $999. These ones also only have maple fretboards on them. They introduced the two-tone sunburst color, and one called Daphne Blue. But it's not the same blue as the regular 50 Stratocaster. That one's called Sonic Blue. Moving on, we jump up a decade to the 60 Strat. These guys have the alder body with 3 vintage 60 Strat single coil pickups, a mid-60 C-shaped profile neck, the 7¼ inch radius with 21 vintage style frets, and the 6-point tremolo. So it seems like a fairly basic looking Stratocaster here. You've got interesting color choices again. Ice blue metallic, that's kind of nice. Surf green. I don't know how I feel about this color. I don't think it would be my personal choice, but I like seeing it out there. And then a traditional 3-tone sunburst. Having a hard time deciding which one I would choose. I think I would go ice blue metallic on this one. And we've got the Palfero fretboard. And similar to the 50 style, you also have a modded 60 style. Fretboard options the same, only Palfero. Get 2 new flavors, Olympic White. Ooh, Burgundy Mist Metallic is back. I like Burgundy Mist, it's kind of an interesting color. I had one of the matching headstock ones from the mid-90s a while ago. And it looks like the differences between the 60s is the same as the 50s one. You get a more modern neck shape, you get hotter pickups, 9½ inch radius fretboard instead of 7¼ an updated tremolo unit, and the S1 switch for additional tonal opportunities. The cost difference is the same, $899 to $999. Then the next one is the 70 Stratocaster. It does not have a modified version, so there's only one to talk about here, and it's priced right in the middle of those guys at $949.99. So let's see what's going on here. Being a 70 style Stratocaster, they gave it the large headstock, which I'm not as big of a fan of, but what made me ultimately want to talk about this series is I love the fact that they brought back the bullet truss rod. That's kind of one of those quirky features I liked from the 70s, mainly because my first Stratocaster was an Antigua Strat from '79. So that quirky feature works for me. These guys get an ash body with an early 70s C neck profile, revoiced 70s Strat pickups. You only have the option of a 7¼ inch radius on these guys with the vintage style tremolo. Oh, and it says they did the F-stamp tuning machines. Let's take a look. That's cool. I like that. It definitely has a really nice vintage vibe to it. I'm digging the ash body because wood grain speaks to me. Get a Sienna Sunburst, Mocha, that's a 70s Strat right there, an aged natural. That's kind of a tough choice. I mean, the colors are definitely period correct, but I don't think any of them really stand out to me enough. But if I had to choose one, I'd probably go the Sunburst. So those are all 5 of the new Stratocasters. Now let's move on to the Teles. Starting with the 50s. These ones are rocking alder bodies with the early 50s U neck profile, revoiced 50s Tele pickups, 7¼ inch radius 21 frets with the 3 saddle style bridge and the vintage style tuning machines. Overall, I'm not seeing anything to get super excited about. It looks like just a really nice basic Telecaster here. That'll make a nice player for someone. You only have a maple fretboard option, which is what I prefer anyways. And we've got Fiesta Red as a color, Sonic Blue, and Sunburst. I think I'd have to go blue on this one. And then similar to the Strat, we have a 50s modified version. Ooh, this one has the ash alder body mix, but has the soft V custom shop pickups. Wow, that's pretty impressive. A custom shop pickup on a made in Mexico guitar. The 9½ inch radius with the vintage style 3 saddle bridge and the 4-way and S1 switching. I've never heard of a 4-way switch on a Telecaster before now. Let me digest this here. Okay. Now that I think about it, my Merle Haggard Telecaster I reviewed, it had something similar. So it has like an in and out of phase option, which I remember I really liked on that one. So this is actually a lot more appealing to me than the unmodified version. Colors on this one, Surf Green, Daphne Blue, Natural. Despite being more tonally diverse, I don't think I like any of these colors on this particular model. But $899 versus $999, here's your spec differences. Moving on, the standard 60s one comes stock with a Bigsby on it. That definitely bumps your price up, as we're now at about $1050. These ones also come with either an ash or alder body, the early 60 C neck profile, revoiced 60 Tele pickup, 7¼ inch radius, Bigsby vibrato, and vintage style tuning machines. Once again, only Pal Ferro fretboard, white blonde finish, 3-color Sunburst. Wow. I think with the Bigsby, I prefer the Sunburst finish because that's a little bit more blingy and just kind of matches the vibe of this guitar. Take a look at that interesting bridge right there too. Moving on, the modified version of the 60s Tele does not have a Bigsby, and it's actually cheaper than the standard one in this case. These ones are only alder bodies, the modern C neck, hot 60s pickups, the 9½ inch radius, the regular style bridge, and once again that 4-way selector switch and S1 switching. So the main differences are the neck profile, which fretboard radius you like better, and now you have to choose between vibrato system or not, and if you want fancy electronics. But in this case, the fancy electronics are cheaper. I'd probably choose the 60s modded. Now there's actually more Telecasters than Stratocasters in this new series, and this is another lineup of 3 that made me interested in the Vintera. So we have the 70s thin line Telecaster with the wide range humbuckers. Then they also featured it in the deluxe version. It looks like the main differences here are in the headstock size. Then they also offered a 70s Telecaster Custom with the single coil in the bridge. So let's go ahead and take a brief look at these. So thin lines. I love thin line Telecasters because there's like a certain vibe to them. I've actually owned one of these. I think it was like a 74 or something. So this one speaks to me, especially again with that doofy little bullet truss rod. Finish options available are Age Natural, Candy Apple Red, and Vintage Blonde. That's a tough choice, but I think I'd have to go Age Natural because that's what I'm used to seeing on most of the vintage examples. So these guys have the ash body with thin C neck profile, the revoiced wide range humbuckers, 7¼ inch radius with the vintage style Strat hardtail bridge. The 70s style F tuning machines again. Man, I love these 70s models. So the deluxe version, a much larger headstock. I'm not personally a huge fan of that, but it depends what look you're going for. But 3-tone sunburst, mocha, and vintage blonde. For this one, I'd have to choose mocha, because that's what I'm more used to seeing with these guys. Maple fretboard, only an alder body, thin C-neck profile, looks like the same wide range humbuckers on here. 9½ inch radius, and those cool tuning machines again. So it looks like the difference between these two, if you're trying to decide between them, is which fretboard radius you like better. And if you want a thin line Telecaster with the F-hole and body chambering, or just a solid body one like you're used to. Other things to keep in mind are like toggle switch location. If you're a Les Paul player, you might like that Telecaster Deluxe better, because it has a similar layout with the toggle switch on the front bout, and then you have 2 volumes and 2 tones, whereas on the thin line you only have a master volume, master tone, and your traditional style Fender switch. Even though I'm a Les Paul guy, thin line Telecasters, they're just too cool. I'd have to choose that one. But then the final one for your consideration is the Telecaster Custom. Man, this thing is just like a blend of both of those. This appeals to me more so than the Custom, because I think the wide range humbuckers on a Telecaster just look funky. This look works better for me. So color options are black, Fiesta red, not digging that one, no. And Sonic blue, nope. Gotta go black on that one. It's the only one that looks remotely nice to me. Spec-wise, we've got the alder body, thin C-neck, the revoiced pickups, 7¼ inch radius, vintage style bridge, and the 70s F tuning machines. So if you have to choose between custom and deluxe over here, it looks like it comes down to what style headstock you like best, what fretboard you like best, and if you want that single coil in the bridge or another wide range humbucker. Honestly, despite looking similar, they're very different. Moving on to the Jazzmasters, we get the Vintera 60s and the 60s modified. The colors on the regular one are ice blue metallic and Olympic white. I could see how this might appeal to some people. It's got a very nice vintage-esque vibe to it, but I'd probably have to go ice blue metallic. I love the matching headstocks on these. Another thing I really like about these is the Wispy Wind logo. So these guys have the alder body, thin C-neck, the 60s Jazzmaster pickups, 7¼ inch radius with the vintage style tremolo and the lead rhythm circuit. And then the modified version, you lose the painted headstock. So if you don't dig that, you'll have to go for this one. But you get surf green and sunburst. That's a tough choice, because I feel like a Jazzmaster should be a color that stands out, but tobacco burst kind of blends in. So I'd probably have to reluctantly go surf green on this one. Specs, we get the alder body, modern C-neck profile, hot 60s Jazzmaster pickups, 9¼ inch radius, oh, and I like this one, the Adjusto-matic bridge, and the lead rhythm circuit. So it looks like the differences here are hotter pickups, modern C-neck profile, but now that I read here, it says it has a satin finished back, which makes it play faster. I personally really love that feature. Then the fretboard radius, as well as what type of bridge you want. I don't personally see why the modified version one costs $100 more, except for that's how it is on all the other models. Next, they're paying tribute to the 60s Jaguars. So 3-tone sunburst on this one with Pau Ferro fretboard. You could also choose ocean turquoise with matching headstock. I think that gives it just enough flair that I'd choose that one over it. Alder body, mid-60s neck. Recreated 60s Jaguar pickups, 7¼ inch radius, vintage style trem, lead rhythm circuit. Oh, when it's modified, you get double humbuckers. Now that's what I consider modified. So Sonic blue, surf green, you don't get a matching headstock on either of them, so I'd probably go surf green on this one. So it looks like alder body, modern C neck with that satin finish, atomic humbucking pickups. Let's read a little bit more into that. They're fat-sounding humbuckers. Well, that's what a humbucker sounds like anyways. Powerful yet articulate. They're just the thing for modern musical styles. I'd be interested to see how these things sound. Looks like the modern fretboard radius, the Adjusto-matic, and controls. The 2 sliders activate and deactivate each pickup, while the 3rd slider activates a tone cut. The wheels on the upper horn select between single coil and humbucking modes for each pickup, and are joined by a kill switch. For someone who's never actually touched a Jaguar, that sounds really confusing to me, but I bet it's not so bad in person. So if you need help choosing between these, it looks like you get slightly fancier electronics on the modern version. The humbucking versus single coil, which that's going to be your main choice right there. What type of neck profile and finish you like on the back of the neck, as well as the fretboard radius and bridge style. So really, these things are super different. It looks like they did a 60s Mustang, but there's no modified version to it. So we don't have anything to compare it to, but it's $900, made in Mexico. You can choose between Lake Placid Blue, which is a classic color, Seafoam Green. I like Seafoam better than I like Surf. It seems to be a little bit darker, but still bright. And Sunburst. I mean, it looks good, but I feel like if you're getting a Mustang, it should be a solid finish. I'd probably have to go Lake Placid Blue on this one. Your only options here are the alder body with the 60C neck profile, which will be glossy, the Revoice 60 Mustang pickups, 7 1/4 vintage style radius, the vintage style tremolo unit, and the vintage style controls. Since they only did one Mustang guitar, they decided to do a bass with it as well. So in that aspect, yes, the Mustang does get 2 versions. So we get Fiesta Red in color, Seafoam Green, and 3-color Sunburst. I think on this one, the Seafoam works. Spec-wise, we've got the alder body, thin C neck profile, 60s Mustang bass pickup, the 7 1/4 radius fretboard, you better like those if you want one of these, the vintage style bridge, and the vintage style tuning machines. It's kind of an interesting bass. I don't think I would ever really pick one of these things up though. It's not something that necessarily speaks to me personally, but I get the quirkiness of it. Take a look at that logo, that's kind of cool. I like the speed. Moving on, they've done a Vintera 50s P bass. So Dakota Red. Kind of an interesting vibe with this finish, that fretboard, and that pickguard. Seafoam Green, yeah, that doesn't work with that combination. Vintage Blonde, it's kind of bland, everything being the same color, but I kind of like it at the same time. But I think ultimately I'd have to choose Dakota Red. So ash or alder body, I think it comes down to if you want that vintage blonde finish or not. Vintage C neck profile, Revoice 50s P bass pickup, 7 1/4 radius on your fretboard, 4-styled bridge, anodized aluminum pickguard. Honestly, I definitely say it's the pickguard that makes this one stand out. And out of the entire bass series, this is probably one I would consider, purchasing if I needed a bass. But this next series is another reason why I wanted to talk about the Vintera series. Look at this. It's beautiful. A 60s jazz bass in Fire Mist Gold. I saw this one on the Reverb video of these, and I'm not a bass guy. I don't look at basses. I don't really talk about basses too much unless Glary sends me one. Or it happens to come up in Trade Tuesday or something. But this thing's beautiful. But besides Fire Mist Gold, if you want to choose an inferior color, there's Daphne Blue, which honestly it looks pretty cool too. And 3-tone Sunburst if you want to be traditional. Blue and gold, that's where it's at. So these guys rep alder bodies with a thin C neck profile. Revoice 60s J bass pickups. You've got the 7 1/4 radius with a 4-saddle style bridge and vintage style tuning machines. This is just a nice looking bass. Something about that gold colored finish. I wish they would have done it on some of the Stratocasters or maybe even one of them Telecasters. It works with that tortoiseshell style pickguard. It's just a cool jazz bass. But hey, if you don't like the 60s style jazz bass at $1,000, you can move over to the 70s style for just a little bit more, $50. So these guys, you get 3-color Sunburst, Aged Natural, and Inca Silver. That's kind of interesting. You could get the silver version of this one, then get the gold version of that one. However, personally, from the stock photos anyways, none of these colors speaks to me, but what I like about this one, the 70s style, you get these like block inlays right here. When I was buying my first bass, I went with one of those Dean neon green things because it had block inlays. But these guys have the alder body, the thin C neck profile, Revoice 70s J bass pickups, 7 1/4 radius, the standard style bridge, and stamp tuning machines. So besides being a little bit more expensive, what's the difference between 60s and 70s? Well, looks like your necks are the same, your bodies are the same, your pickups are voiced slightly different, fretboard radius is the same, looks like, pretty much everything is the same. So it really comes down to what style pickups you like better, what pickguard color you like, and if you want dot inlays or if you want the really cool block inlays. The perfect mix for me would be the 60s jazz bass in Fire Mist Gold with a 70s jazz bass neck. That would just be fantastic. Make one for me, Fender. Send it to me. So that appears to be all 20 of the new Vintera series from Fender. So in the end, there's a bunch of different iterations between 50s, 60s, and 70s styles. It comes down to if you want vintage voice pickups or things that are slightly hotter. Some of them even have that nice satin finish neck on the back. That's why the modified or modern ones are slightly more expensive. My first reactions with these is these seem rather expensive coming out of Mexico. I mean, not really being a Fender diehard fan, I've never really followed the new models as much as I do now. I can't bring myself to actually pay this much for one of these instruments because the made in Mexico stuff unfortunately doesn't hold value as well. As far as doing reviews for any of these, I mean, if you're buying one of these and you want to send it to me for documentation purposes first and then I send it on to you, yeah, that's probably the only way we would see one of these, short of Fender sending me them for a review and demo. But my top 4 list here, just in case Fender is watching. Number 1, the 50 Stratocaster in white blonde. I think this is the only one that would tempt me enough to maybe purchase one for a review and demo. I love the finish. I think a soft V-neck profile has an interesting sound to it. I wish it had the satin finish back neck, but everything else about this one, it works for me. It looks good. Number 2 for coolest is the 60s jazz bass. Again, I'd prefer the 70s neck on it, but that color is just amazing. For the third one, I think I'd choose the 70s Telecaster Custom in black. It just has a very distinct vibe to it. It's kind of familiar to me, the wide range humbucker in the neck, but then it's still Fender familiar in the bridge. Then a fourth one just for fun. I mean, this Jaguar, I would like to try it. I mean, it's got humbuckers, it's got a bunch of different switches. It'd be a pain in the butt to demo all the different tones out of it. But this one in surf green would be my fourth choice. And number 5, I choose this one as my number 1 player because it's not necessarily fancy or anything. It's just a blackguard Tele, classic vibe, but custom shop pickups, 4-way selector switch, and S1 switching. This thing would just be so tonally diverse. I think that's a real knockout. So let me know in the comments section, what was your favorite one from the new Vintera series? What do you think of the name, Vintage Era? I think it's got a cool vibe to it, but I'm having a hard time remembering how to spell it or even how to say it. Alright, thank you Troglodytes for watching today. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care.